Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast. Today we have Dr. Carolyn Dean. She is a medical doctor and naturopath, and she's the author of over 50 books, including bestsellers like The Magnesium Miracle, along with IBS for Dummies, Hormone Balance, Death by Modern Medicine, and 110 Kindle books. Carolyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Freddie. So glad to be here. I just find you such a sweet, charming, aloha person. I live in Maui, and we look for aloha. Aloha will be me at the farmers market where I volunteer for my farm, and I hand out a banana to someone. Say, "Oh, just take this," and their face just lights up. And I said, "That's what we do here." Or walking along the beach. I live in Kihei Wailea. There's a beach walk in front of several hotels. They're low-rise hotels. They fit in. It's awesome. And you walk by, and I collect smiles. I smile to people, and they smile back. And we all get uplifted. Or, we see tourists struggling with trying to take a selfie. We say, "Oh, can I take your picture for you?" And their face lights up because they're not used to the aloha nature that all humans should have. You have that.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's so interesting, starting the conversation there, because I can be that, and I know there's times I've been on the planet where I was so depleted. I was pouring from an empty cup, and I didn't always have that to give everybody. And that's what a gift to be able to be in that place, to make the choice to offer those aloha vibes.
Right. And in your podcast, you talk about energy, and in your 200th podcast, you talk about how sometimes you're just so low. And that's what we're going to talk about today is magnesium, because magnesium makes energy. If you are saturated with enough magnesium, then you can keep giving energy and not feel that you're losing it when you give it. They talk about, oh, you give out and it comes back. Well, a lot of people say, oh no, I've got to protect my energy. I can't give it. And the tightness comes, and the bitterness comes because you're not getting that human interaction. Magnesium is responsible for 80% of known metabolic functions, including energy, everything to do with your muscles and nerves, everything to do with up to 1,000 different enzyme processes in the body. So I tell people, if you get your magnesium right, then everything else will flow from there.
Let's start there. Getting your magnesium right. There's a door to walk through. What does that mean? I mean, because we could say there's diagnostic testing, there's like how I feel, there's where does my magnesium come from organically. If I was just living on a perfect little ecosystem in which everything was in right proportions, my food would ideally give me all the magnesium I need.
But it doesn't. We've lost that ability. That ship has sailed. So people who have their big summits and webinars about eating the right food and everything, they really don't know that 100 years ago we were getting 600 milligrams of magnesium in our daily diet. Now we're lucky to get 200. And if I'm saying 80% of your body needs magnesium, and you're only getting a third of what you need, that means 2/3 of your body isn't functioning properly. And I guess I have a little mini story like yours, Freddie, just mini in the sense that I was severely magnesium deficient. When I was in New York in the early 90s, I was doing AIDS research using an alternative method. And Random House asked me to write a book on magnesium. And I thought, how can I write a 300-page book on one mineral? And when I started the research, luckily, I had a computer by then, and I found that every one of my health symptoms was magnesium deficiency. I had headaches, I had eye twitches, I would choke on swallowing a dietary supplement. I had heart palpitations. I
Mm,
had mild IBS. I had leg cramps, Charlie horse leg cramps. You know, my muscles would tighten up. I was a mess, but I was very high functioning. So I was letting my adrenals take over. I went into early menopause because I was pulling on my hormones so much. So I went out to get magnesium higher than what I had in my multiple, and I immediately got the laxative effect.
mm,
And a number of people that happens to, especially when doctors mostly recommend, oh, take some magnesium oxide. Now that magnesium compound is only 4% absorbed. The other 96% goes out your intestine. So I wrote the book, The Magnesium Miracle. It got published in 2003, and for the next 10 years, I was looking for a mineral company that would research and make a non-laxative magnesium, because I was relegated to Epsom salt baths, you know, putting magnesium oil on my skin until I developed skin rashes. So I realized that with my level of deficiency, I needed much more than I could ever take by mouth. And then that led me into my next world. I never thought I'd have a dietary supplement company and be working with a non-laxative stabilized ion of magnesium. And then that led me to realize that 68 or more medical conditions can actually be magnesium deficiency. And it can even be more than that, Freddie, because if we have 600 muscles and 45 miles of nerves, and if our nerves and muscle cells depend on magnesium opening the gate for some calcium to go in, create the action, and then open the gate and pull out the calcium, then if you don't have that magnesium to open and close the gate, calcium floods into these cells, excites them to death, and we get the tingling and twitching and tightness. So every muscle could be a disease, and every area of your nervous system could be a disease. So we do have a big problem in our society because so few people take enough magnesium to make a difference.
yeah. As a naturopath, especially when you're talking about the state that you were in the 90s, sounds like it was like there's probably like some as an exterior environment or the stress and the AIDS crisis in the 90s, and then your body is feeling incredibly overtaxed. Is it enough to give the body magnesium, and is a body in an acute phase of depletion, does it know what to do with it? That's always my question. It's like, because we as people, we just bring this incredible amount of variables to the table with what we're bringing into a naturopath's office. So how does that work once we start supplementing?
Well, with magnesium, people ask me, well, what form to use? You know, I like my form, but any form of magnesium will help a person because we're so depleted and we need it so much. So people will take any type of magnesium and start feeling more energy. Or a lot of people think it's a sleep aid, so they'll take it at night and they'll sleep better. And then they wake up in the morning feeling better because they've had a good sleep. So any amount of magnesium is going to help a person. And I think what happens in the supplement world, and I know you talk about this, there are so many supplements now being advertised and marketed and pushed. You go to some of these big websites, even doctors and naturopaths and chiropractors. There's hundreds of supplements, and
Hmm.
each of them they have this story about why, and how you should take it. And I'll look at these and I'll find that they hardly even promote magnesium, or I'll listen to a summit about diet they won't even talk about magnesium. So I think, how can that even be possible when every aspect of your body requires these basic minerals? The thyroid requires 9 minerals to make thyroid hormones. The adrenal glands, they need the magnesium, they need sodium. If
Mm-hmm.
you're restricting your salt intake because some doctor wants to squish the liquid out of you to keep your blood pressure down, dehydrate you, dehydrate your cells. I mean, the archaicness of allopathic medicine. I mean, hopefully in the future we'll look back and think that was crazy.
Hmm.
But if you don't have your basic minerals for your thyroid, your adrenals, for your Krebs cycle in your mitochondria. The reason why mitochondria aren't working these days is because they don't have enough magnesium to run the Krebs cycle that creates your energy. So you start with your basic minerals. I start by telling people to put sea salt in their water.
Mm-hmm.
People are not hydrated. And if we can get them to understand that you do need the sodium for your adrenals, these people who say, oh my gosh, I'm just so exhausted. I'm lying down. If I get up quick, I feel dizzy. That's sodium depletion, for Pete's sake.
Yeah.
Or if you take your skin and you pull it up and it doesn't drop right back down, it means you're dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
If you take your fingers and press them like this, and if they don't press down and touch the top of your palm, and if they're tight, you're inflamed. You're
Mm-hmm.
retaining water because you're toxic, and your body is trying to dilute the toxin. So
Yeah.
there are simple things that we can look at to show that we're not getting the basics. And in going on the supplement rant still, in New York, I was working with a Chinese herbal formula. I would make a tincture. I would potentize the tincture homeopathically.
Mm-hmm.
We would inject that sterile homeopathic tincture into acupuncture points with a machine that put an electric spin on the whole process. I mean, it was out of this world awesome. And we had great results. And then Fauci came along and told everybody to take AZT. So everybody went to the AZT trials and died.
Mm.
So I wanted to make those herbs into, or we had some oral herbs to use along with the injectables, but I thought, well, let's just make it accessible. The doctors aren't going to learn how to inject this. It's just not practical in any sense. And when I researched different labs that were creating herbal formulas, I said, can you guarantee that the herbs are clean and pure and organic? They said, well, we get most of they're Chinese herbs, so we're getting them from China. We don't know if they're organic, but if they come to us and they're contaminated, we can clean them and then they pass the FDA inspection.
Yeah.
So I said, no herbs for me.
Yeah. The
Unless you
cleaning
grow them
agents are
yourself.
always
I
problematic.
know, I
Yeah.
know. So then I realized there was all that happening, and then I went to I was in the health freedom movement back in the early 2000s. So I went to a couple of Codex Alimentarius meetings in Bonn, Germany, and in Rome. And in these big forums, they were talking about how to keep dietary supplements in synthetic form, low potency, so they wouldn't interfere with drugs.
Mm-hmm.
That was the modus operandi for Codex Alimentarius, and to allow as much toxicity into the food supply as people would accept. And it was all for big business, big agri, big food, and big pharma. So I said, oh my gosh, we're not going to survive this, because they wanted that to be an international code that everyone would keep low potency synthetic supplements. So I guess it was then, before then I had written the Magnesium Miracle. I knew I needed magnesium. I knew that the basics were important. So I came home from those meetings and I said, well, I can't fight this war for health freedom. I'm going to have to take care of take care of myself. And I finally created a magnesium product and made everything that I'm doing low potency, food based, 100% absorbed, because that's what we need from food. We're not getting it from food,
Mm-hmm.
so we have to get it from dietary supplements. That's how vitamins began, as food-based supplements. And then the whatever industry, the supplement industry said, well, we can take this coal tar and squish it into the same formula as the vitamin and nobody will know the difference. I mean, they didn't try to pull the wool over our eyes, but they acted like it was the same thing. However, the natural would be like my right hand and the synthetic would be like my left hand. And if you have a receptor that needs my right hand, the left hand is not going to get into that receptor to do
Mm-hmm.
the activity. So they messed up the whole supplement industry by going synthetic.
Yeah. It's so interesting. There's a couple things you said, and it's so funny. You said you were like, Freddie, you did 200 episodes, and I'm at this point in the process where I always say the podcast is for me, right? It's like I grow so much from it. I love asking deep questions. I love getting opportunities just to go right to the source. But I also want to talk about difficult things, and I never want to alienate anybody who hears anything on the podcast and says, "Oh my God, that's terrible. I don't agree with that." However, I find people can often accept new information. It's how it's delivered. So one thing I love about the whole conversation, especially around the AIDS epidemic, did you see the movie The Dallas Buyers Club?
Sure.
And how
Yep.
the government essentially shut down. They were stopping people getting high dose vitamin C, magnesium, zinc, Myers cocktails. It was a
Yep.
fascinating. That was an Academy Award winning movie in which we watched the regulatory bodies, not a conspiracy. We'll watch the regulatory bodies stop access to treatments to people that were working. I just want to say that out loud to people. It's like the story gets told in Hollywood, and it's like it is a valid thing to look at, and I don't want to create a world in which everybody is against us or to get us. I'm not convinced that there's bad people doing bad things. It's wounded human beings that are so indoctrinated into the system of capitalism that their win is to grow their business, and that's it. Usually comes down to the money, right? And I understand that your incentive model, being on the
Yeah.
receiving end of an incentive model, when people are like, "Oh, Freddie, what's your favorite da da da?" I'm like, "Well, this company sponsors the podcast. Now I like it and I use it and I read all their data and I believe in it, but that's who I recommend because I have that relationship." And it's no different in the world of medicine or supplementation. So we come back to, how do we advocate for the person at home that's listening to this podcast and really learn, like, what does their body need and how do you wade through all the crap to get to the real science?
But we have to bring it up to present day, Freddie. What
Yeah.
happened with COVID? What
Yeah, a
happened?
mess.
Don't
A
take
mess.
vitamin D. Don't take zinc. Don't take ivermectin. Don't take hydroxychloroquine.
I know.
Don't wait until
Yeah.
the same thing happened back. Like I said, Fauci said, wait for AZT. Don't do anything else. They
Yeah.
demonize the supplement company and supplements themselves.
Yeah.
It's frightening, and it is follow the money. And that's why we depend on podcasts like yours to get a bit
Mhm.
of information out there. Because what the individual does is take responsibility for their own health, do the research, find the
Mhm.
supplements that work for them. And I say, work for you. Because if you take a supplement just, you know, because of the marketing that they do for it and
Mhm.
the promise that never you're buying the promise, if it's
You're
not
buying the
fulfilled,
promise.
stop taking it.
Yeah.
You have to get a benefit from what you're taking. And I mean, I say that because when I was just twitching and, all tight and insomniac and neck pain and everything from my magnesium deficiency, when I started taking it, I knew it was the answer. And it wasn't until I was able to take my non-laxative magnesium, I went from having diarrhea at 50 to 100 milligrams to taking 1,200 milligrams. And
Wow.
it took me about a year and a half, and I gradually tapered off because now I only need 450 milligrams, which is like
Yeah.
the RDA, because my
Yeah.
body's saturated. So
Yeah.
that taught, I mean, personal. That's why I say I have a mini story. You have a mega story about your journey. And it allows us to I don't know, have the gravitas or
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
confidence that, man, I went through this and I created something that helped me. And here I'm just passing it on.
Yeah. It's amazing. I have two routes I want to examine here. While we're
Yeah.
fresh in this. So, like you know, in this version of like, where are you in your story? At times, there were times when first I first started out with a really bad bout of undiagnosed rheumatoid arthritis, which really was probably like a biotoxin illness or Lyme. And like you, I was like, I had found stories of people doing high dose, what was it? MSM and magnesium was working very well for people. Um, for me, it didn't. And I never got the like, I was like, oh, the joint pain's horrendous. So then I created a story, because I didn't have the result. But it was more about, I just needed to better understand the body, the biological systems, and what systems were not helping me regulate. And then now I do notice a difference in REM, deep sleep, recovery, muscle stiffness with magnesium. But I had to get things in order first. So, and I had one doctor who's brilliant in New York. He goes, I was like, I'm throwing this away. It doesn't work. He's like, don't throw it away. It might not work yet. He's like, you just got to have timing. And it's where does it come in at what dose and what time and what is the energy behind the action for that? So
Mhm.
like you, I found it's been a process of discovery, what the sweet spot was. Um, and I also want to add, it's so funny when I don't drink dairy anymore, but when I take your magnesium and I add a cap, it almost reminds me of like, this is so warm milk, like a good glass of holistic. There's something, I'm like, my brain immediately thinks of milk. Like when I was a kid, like it feels very nourishing. It's not bitter. It's almost sweet. Have you ever heard
Mhm.
that feedback before?
A little bit, and it's just awesome because it's like your body's recognizing that it's triggering all these different enzyme functions. Yeah,
Yes,
that I have definitely heard that. But let me jump back to your rheumatoid
please.
arthritis experience, the,
Yeah.
and the whole line. One of my other major points of investigation is yeast overgrowth, and what I found is well, yeast, it's natural to the large intestine. In
Mm-hmm.
our culture, the antibiotics kill off good and bad bacteria,
Mm-hmm.
so our intestines get depleted, and yeast will grow up from the large intestine into the small intestine. They'll change from a budding stage to a thread-like mycelial stage, poke holes in the small intestine, cause leaky gut.
Yes.
Now, we've heard bits of what I'm saying with the microbiome, and we've got SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. We've got all these problems with our gut, and the gut is very important for the whole body, etc., etc. But they're leaving out yeast now. They do not include yeast in their microbiome talk.
Mm.
They've ignored the whole thing because it's so hard to quote treat. And what I think happens with folks is they'll take an antibiotic or get a steroid, or women will be on the birth control and they'll develop yeast overgrowth, and then they'll be exposed to something like Lyme. And the environment that yeast creates in the mucous membranes, you'll see the coated tongue on
Mm-hmm.
actors and singers. They'll open their mouth wide, and you see this big white tongue. They've got
Yeah.
yeast.
Yeah.
And every mucous membrane, itchy eyes, itchy ears, vaginitis in women. So the environment will allow viruses and bacteria and Lyme to
Mm-hmm.
reside. And at the same time, the immune system is so plagued with all these yeast toxins trying to get rid of them. There are 78 different yeast toxins. So the body's batting those away. The yeast toxins will block thyroid receptors. So you've
Mm-hmm.
got this incredible scenario that nobody is really looking into that will allow these other organisms. When I started doing my hospital rotations, when I was in, it was probably the second year medicine, I had yeast overgrowth. I was on the pill. I'd had a lot of antibiotics. I had mercury
Mm-hmm.
filling. Um, and I started getting these horribly painful, tiny little nasal boils, staphylococcal nasal boils in
Mm.
my nostrils. And I didn't find out or realize until much later that that was a sign that my yeast was really overgrown. I was really yeasty, and it allowed the staph to grow because staph is everywhere. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
there's the staph resistant bacteria, antibiotic resistant staphylococcal bacteria. Now they're rampant in hospitals. So what I'm saying is, if we can work on yeast overgrowth, and I did have to create some formulas for that too, because you cannot starve this stuff away. There are no
Yeah.
medications for yeast, and that's why allopathic medicine has ignored it. You have to work with a picometer stabilized silver, and I work with Saccharomyces boulardii, which is
Mm-hmm.
used in children's diarrhea for fungal infections, and humic fulvic, which I know you love, as a
Mm-hmm.
chelator and also as a soil-based bacteria promoter. So there are ways that we can work on our yeast, but we have to recognize it first. What I found in my company is customers would be taking our magnesium for 2 or 3 months, and then all of a sudden they'd be phoning up customer service and saying, I thought the magnesium was working, but I've got these skin rashes and women vaginitis and coated tongue and itchiness and gas and bloating. What's going on? And we say, hey, your immune system is strong enough now to start fighting your yeast overgrowth.
Mm.
And that's what was happening. And then we
Wow.
could support that. So it is so important when someone comes to a practitioner and they have a list of 100 symptoms. Where do you start? Well,
Yeah.
I start with this picometer magnesium, get the immune system going. We work on some of the food-based methylated B vitamins, a couple of amino acids that are precursors to glutathione, take
Mm-hmm.
out the trash, work on the multiple minerals for the thyroid and the adrenals. And I mean, along with some vitamin D, D3, K2, and omega with some A and E, you've got everything. You have
Yeah.
got all the building blocks your cells need to do what they're meant to do. Our cells are so primed and programmed to take care of us. You've got all the toxins coming in. Yes, was it yesterday? I did an interview with a wonderful gentleman who runs a Parkinson website,
Mm-hmm.
and we talked about the heavy metals that can be affecting the brain as well as the buildup of calcium, aluminum in the brain, all that. There are receptors in on cells. They haven't all been studied, receptors for minerals. They've found that proteins in the body have 3,500 receptor sites for magnesium. If these receptor sites aren't tied up,
Used up.
bound
Yeah.
up, used properly with magnesium, and they're empty of magnesium, what's going to go in there? Heavy metals. They'll just, and the same with chemicals and toxins. The body in a weakened state will accept all these things. It's like the prime directive in the world is that if your body is healthy, you're not going to get sick. you have all these organisms within you, but they won't be allowed to express themselves if you're healthy. When we were doing the AIDS study in New York, we tested people for viruses and bacteria. I don't think we were testing for Borrelia Lyme back then, but every parasite and organism we tested for was there. And
Hmm.
I realized then that the body has to be strong enough to push these things to the side. And because of my original work with yeast back in the late 70s, I started to work with yeast because I learned about it in naturopathic school. And then in 1986, up in Canada, I did a TV show and Dr. William Crook was interviewed, and he wrote The Yeast Connection. He was the first doctor to expose the yeast problem. He was a pediatrician. He could see these kids with allergies had yeast overgrowth. It was awesome. On that 90-minute call-in talk show, we had 80,000 people trying to get into the show.
Wow.
80,000. So yeast is very important. And, I wanted to say to you, Freddie, when you, with the rheumatoid, was there something you had beforehand, antibiotics, a surgery, some major stress that maybe weakened your immune system? You had yeast overgrowth and then went on to an autoimmune disease, which is what yeast can do.
Yeah. I mean, it's highly likely. Yeah, I had stuff, growing up. I grew up next to a toxic chemical plant that was shut down. Like Aaron Brockovich was next to our high school. And, I
Right.
remember playing in cornfields where the planes would fly over, spraying the spray on the corn, and we were building forts in them. And, I could give you 100 examples of stuff that moved to the city at 9/11. That was highly, highly, highly stressful to go be a Broadway performer. So you're like, you're sitting there, you're setting your bags down and the towers are still smoking. So there was lots of stuff, that I'm sure. And, I've done some great trauma work with EMDR as of late, which I've been talking about a lot, and just seeing, have these visions. You're like, oh, that's where cancer entered my body. That's where I chose to shut down this emotionality completely because it was safe. So I firmly, I agree. I align with that idea. And you think about, you get enough of these stories where you're like, when you examine with a really great guide or a therapist, and you're like, wow, what a perfect little terrain to have a disease to, take hold and really lock on. And then it becomes, how do you want to work with that? It's either a
Right.
malady in which someone smited you with, or it's a gift to like better understand the body and grow from and be like, how can I educate, empower, and inspire other people around it?
Which
So
is
yeah,
what you've done. Yeah.
it's what we're doing.
Well, right. How I kind of detached from being fearful of cancer was when I studied German New Medicine,
Hmm.
and I'm sure you've looked into that. German New Medicine, Total Biology is the French version. I studied that because it came through Montreal, Canada, so I learned it from French naturopaths. But it's the conflict basis of disease. If you
Hmm.
have a conflict that you think is irresolvable, it'll sit in your brain and then create these chronic, constant, we call them gramophone thoughts. But since gramophones don't exist, people don't know what they are. But these swirling thoughts that the brain says, "Oh my gosh, I've got to deal with the conflict," and they put the conflict in a body part to try to solve the conflict, like
Yeah.
a mother whose child is mortally wounded and they're in intensive care. The mother's breasts will start producing more milk duct cells in order to produce milk to nurture the child, and then that becomes diagnosed as breast cancer.
Yeah.
So that someone who has, I can't stomach what's happening to me, they can develop an ulcer or stomach cancer. So we have to resolve conflicts as we go
Mm.
along. EMDR is just great. It's really, really important. Um, but understanding conflict, I had a conflict with swimming, with water. I was afraid of water. I have a shower, splash my face, and kind of gasp. So I, I searched for, well, what's my story with being so afraid of water here? I got accepted into medical school. We lived in the nurses' residence by the hospital, and there was a nurses' pool. So I said, look, you know, you're going to be a doctor. You can't be afraid of water. So I went into the swimming pool and just started dunking my head in and out until I got comfortable. But that was just getting me to learn how to swim. When I called my auntie in Scotland and just asked her, what are the stories for the family? She told me one. She said, in the 1920s, uh, three young ancestors of yours who were in their 20s went across the bay in the dory to get a doctor for a home birth. A storm blew up and they all drowned.
Mm,
So there's my
wow.
drowning fear. And I had this realization about I need to learn how to deal with water in my 20s, mid 20s, when I entered medical school. I decided to be the doctor on the scene so no one would have to come and get me and drown. And I decided early on I didn't really want to have biological kids. So I had foster kids along the way. So I was solving that ancestral problem without realizing it. And when the story came together with my water fear, it just it just vanished. I'm out
Yeah.
there in the water now with I pull a little boogie board behind me and I'm swimming over reef sharks and
Yes.
diving down. So realizing that, like you're doing with NMDR, just the layers. I mean, the
Yeah.
layers is what's going on. You get slapped when you're a kid, and then someone sort of bumps you when you're an adult, and it brings up that slap.
Yeah, it's incredible, and you hear your story is incredible about how you're solving for problems of the past, but you hear 100 of those, and you're like, of course. Or there's a great book on radical late stage remission of cancers, and it's people removing themselves from the environment that has an influence on the body and the body's ability to either feel safe or have a belief system where it can get better. That is always a person has removed themselves from environment A, which is making them sick. They go somewhere else, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, your cancer melted. The tumors are gone. The 100 tumors are gone from the body. So we've got enough instances of this. And there's so many examples throughout time, of course. And I always think of this when a woman, I got on a training the other day with a woman. I was training on a lymphatic technology, and she gave me a really nasty email right before we got on the call. She's like, this is the way it's going to go. If you don't like it, you can go F yourself. And how do you choose to respond? And I was so tired. I had worked all weekend. I was like, kind of had a cold. And I was just like, man. And I let myself go. I let myself have it with her. Exactly what I would say if she was right in front of me. I was like, you blah, 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 blah. And then I was like, you know what? She's a little baby. She was left alone on the couch. She screamed for 2 hours. Nobody ever came. And
Right.
that's what I'm seeing right now. And it's not about me. And I got on the call. We had a great training, and I was even very honest and transparent. I was like, I just want to say, before we started this, that email was fiery. It really got me going. And she laughed. She knows. She's gotten that feedback before from other people that there's like a barrier there, but it's a great opportunity knowing what we each carry. I think you're like, okay, how can I bring a lot of compassion into this moment?
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to meet at each time when someone is saying negative things to you and you don't say, well, I don't agree,
Hmm.
then it's like you're accepting it. You're giving them sort of carte blanche to fill your head with with stuff that you shouldn't. And then afterwards, think, oh, I don't like that. So it stays with you. If you can meet the situation as it's happening and, in an okay, pleasant way. At the market, I volunteer for the farmers market that I support. And people will come up and they'll just say, oh, give me this, give me that. And I'll say, good morning. How are you?
Uh-huh.
And then they'll get into their body and say, oh, yes, good morning.
Yeah.
Seriously, people are so, in
Well,
their
it's
bubble.
look at the information at the level that it's coming at us. Our poor little brains. We only pick up so many. I forgot how many bytes it is of information that we see in a visual field, and then how many. It's like whatever. It's I think Dr. Patrick Porter talks about 80,000 megabytes of information. We pick up 100 that I create. I'm like, oh, this is real. This is true. So what we see. Especially now, little supercomputers in our phones and our pockets, and the laptop, the information that's coming at us, it's a lot. So I do understand it, but I also, because of knowing how the brain works, my hardware, I've got a plan for that. I got a program for that. I got to give it, I got to give the body the environment that it needs to operate in a state of heart, in a state of connection, and that you saying, how are you? Let's talk before this just becomes a transactional exchange, because that's all we're doing here, right? We're exchanging energies, and I think we tend to wish away. We're like, I don't want to get to the point where I'm up on the mountaintop. Not be now, be here, be here, be now.
Yeah, be here and do as well.
Mm,
Because the more we just talk about things and don't take action, I mean,
mm,
that's what I find. So many people now are just complaining, and they're with the social media, they just react and throw out words. And well, first of all, they're spending all their time sitting down and not being out in nature and
mm-hmm.
not smiling at people and not creating, action and activity. We're so um, rigid in all ways. And
Yeah.
and what we've gone through in the past few years, I think it's created PTSD in most people.
Oh, a
And
million percent. Yeah.
I mean, and especially if we listen to the news, which is all a lie.
Yeah, I don't watch the
Everybody's
news.
lying now. So
I
we've
don't
got
watch
to
the news.
create a world for ourselves where we're happy and we have energy, and that's where, we're talking about magnesium, and I'm saying
Yeah.
it makes your ATP energy, and every energetic machine you use is going to either take your energy or, well, it'll take your magnesium for one thing. The whole Wi-Fi business, what it does is it opens up calcium channels.
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi is known to open up the cell calcium channels that I talked about. And
Yes.
if you have magnesium to keep those channels closed properly and only open when necessary, then you are balancing out the Wi-Fi. Seriously, even on that level, magnesium is going to be helping you. And
Yeah.
any energetic technology that you use, you have to have your minerals in order to create that electrical conductivity.
Yes.
Your heart rhythm depends on the electrolytes, the calcium, the chloride, sodium, potassium, and magnesium. However, you talked about measuring magnesium hours ago.
But
We
I
don't,
want to, you drew it
yeah,
back for us. I want to get to measuring it.
yeah. You do not even see a magnesium being measured on your electrolyte panel. Now, what happened there is they went for using a serum magnesium blood test, and in the serum, which is your blood serum, there's only 1 to 2% of your total body magnesium. So that amount is always going to look kind of perfect, because if it's not, then your heart rhythm will go off balance. It'll go irregular. So the body is so smart that If the level goes down in your serum magnesium, it'll pull it out of your muscles and bones. So doctors got to the point of saying, well, their magnesium is always normal. We don't even have to bother testing it. Using the wrong test, I come to the wrong conclusion. Now, my company, we've been funding studies to look at magnesium testing and absorption, etc. So we've been testing ionized magnesium blood test so that it's the ion of magnesium that goes into the cells, and that's what we want to know the level of in the body. And that's where in my technology, I have a stabilized ion of magnesium that is my formula. So you take it, you're getting your ions. So we measured it in human subjects. We gave everybody a teaspoon of my picometer magnesium. I'm not allowed to mention the name. The FDA won't let me tell you that the name of a product that could help a health condition.
Yes,
This is where we are right now.
that's where we're at.
So, yeah, that's where we're at. That's what we've devolved to. So after between an hour and 2 hours, that 1 teaspoon is measurable with the ionic magnesium test. Now the trouble is this machine, nobody's buying it, nobody uses it. It's in ICUs and research departments of universities, etc. But that's it. But what we proved in one of our studies was that you can freeze a person's blood. 2 years ago, we did testing on the blood, found the value, unfroze the blood just recently, and the values are the same. So we've proven that you can freeze a person's blood, send it to a lab that does ionic magnesium testing, and start to get some true values. But what's happened with the serum magnesium, they don't bother with it, and the range of serum magnesium and another magnesium blood test called RBC, red blood cell magnesium testing, the range is actually getting lower as the population gets more magnesium depleted.
Of course.
So about 10 years ago, the range for the red blood cell magnesium was something like 4.2 to 6.8. And now it's down to, like, let's say 3.5 to 6.5.
Is there a problem with the red blood cell magnesium level, RBC magnesium?
It's still not great. Get this, Freddie.
Yeah.
The red blood cells don't have mitochondria, and it's in the mitochondria where we find most of the magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? That's why we're doing the studies to try to promote this ionized magnesium test. But then at the same time, we've got a mineral that has a fail safe. If you take, quote, too much, you'll get the laxative effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's only dangerous for people who have heart block, bowel obstruction, myasthenia gravis. I think those are there's one more. And I have them in my Magnesium Miracle book. I probably have them in both books. Did I show you my latest book?
No,
Magnesium.
We got to have people watch us on YouTube too if you want to get a view of the cover.
Yeah. Magnesium, the missing link to total health. So I've updated it and I've put all the relevant new information in it. So what happens with this fail safe is it means you can take magnesium and not feel that you're going to overload yourself. If you see reports that, the negative reports about magnesium that certain people try to put out because they don't like supplements, it will say magnesium can cause heart rhythm irregularity. These are times when doctors have given too much magnesium intravenously in the hospital to patients. And then that gets translated as, oh my gosh, magnesium is dangerous. So with these negative things about magnesium specifically, it's a I was going to say half truth, but it's like a quarter truth. And when people come to me and say, "Oh, well, this or that," and I say, "Well, this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to demonize supplements so that people will just use drugs."
Yeah. When we go back to the idea, and I've always said this to people, even it's like even if I had a positive test on some malady in the body, how does it change the information as far as how my day-to-day lifestyle practices go? It doesn't really change it that much. I'm still understand that the food is of diminished nutrient quality. That doesn't change, regardless of how my tests come back. So what I'm
Right,
able to take in anyway from the food is depleted. So we know um, the popular opinion is to supplement, especially these like building blocks of energy, the building blocks of protein that are paramount for us to go forward and not be a diminished copy of a copy of a copy. So if
hmm
you if you just your average human being who's not going to go out and send their blood away as a freeze dried sample, what is a dosing schedule that you might say might be a good safe guideline for people to look at on the
right.
magnesium?
Right. And the magnesium story is pretty big now because I think it's one of the top selling nutrients. And I probably caused that with my books because all the supplement companies use my book to reference the importance of magnesium. So the
Hmm.
magnesium compounds are huge. There's like a dozen magnesium compounds, and they say,
Yes.
"Oh, magnesium taurate is better for this or that," or magnesium threonate, oh, it gets into your brain. Well, that study was a rat study, and it was a 7% increase of magnesium into the cerebral spinal fluid of rats compared to magnesium citrate. And on the basis of this 7% in difference, they marketed the heck out of it, and now everybody thinks it's the only magnesium for the brain. I can show you magnesium oxide studies of a magnesium that's only 4% absorbed that helps brain function. Any magnesium you take is going to help you because you
Yeah.
need so much of it for so much of your body's processes. However, if you are magnesium deficient like me, you need pure magnesium. When you look at the amount of magnesium in uh, 500 milligrams of a magnesium compound, the magnesium L-threonate is only 34 milligrams in 500.
Hmm.
So for me, if I would have had to take 30 or more of those pills to get my 1200 milligrams, I would have died of diarrhea
Yeah.
because that the laxative effect would have been so strong. And it's the same with all of these um, compounds. If you are trying to treat a magnesium deficiency and deal with your 80% of your function, you need magnesium ions, not the compound. So that's the marketing, scam
Yes.
right now is, oh, well, the taurate is doing this or that, but it's not magnesium. So I'm really okay. So of course, I'm saying my picometer stabilized ion is the best, and that's why I created it. But otherwise, what you look for is a powder or a liquid of a magnesium compound that you put in water to um, help to disassociate the magnesium from from the other part of the compound, and hope that the disassociation stays that way for long enough for you to get some of it into your cell. And it's very hard with magnesium. You drink that, you put it in your bloodstream, and magnesium will disassociate, but then it'll bind right back up and it
Mm.
will form a compound again. You can't get a compound into a cell. You have to wait for
Correct.
that split instant when it's an ion. Now, what the magnesium is going to do again, because it's so hyperactive, it's used in the fuses of fireworks, for Pete's sake. If you remember chemistry lab, they give you a strip of magnesium and you light it on your Bunsen burner and so magnesium is also going to be binding with chemicals, try to detoxify them. It serves a good function there. But some of our common drugs these days, ciprofloxacin, Lipitor, Prozac, they are fluoride molecules, or they have fluoride molecules contained. And the fluoride is supposed to help the drug get across the fatty cell membrane. And it does that. But in the microbiome, the bacteria microbiome in our intestines will break down these drugs. That's part of its job. It breaks down chemicals and drugs and release the fluoride, and that will bind with magnesium. And then you get a magnesium fluoride compound called phthalate. Uh, and that will be attracted to tendons and joints and ligaments. You have a black box warning on ciprofloxacin, a common antibiotic, black box warning that it can cause tendon rupture. And
Yeah.
they aren't equating the fluoride that's in the cipro with the tendon rupture. Oh, well, we don't know. Yeah, it's just another side effect. So we've got a situation now where you'll have an athlete who has a cold, wants to make a meet, that, oh, give me an antibiotic. And after 2 or 3 times of doing that, they'll have a buildup and then they can get a tendon rupture and just ruin their career. I've
Yeah,
seen it happen.
I have personal friends in the music theater community that have had an Achilles tendon rupture trying to get through performances because they were taking Cipro for their voice. So that's with at least within that community, it's known that that's a risk, and that's becoming more of a people are offering that information as it comes forward. But yeah, for the mass of people across the country, if you've not heard that, stay away from Cipro. Fluoride is not our friend. It's
Mhm.
really there's so much to know. It's like we need a human operating manual. Carolyn, if you had an ask to somebody that listens to this episode, and people really want to have a blueprint of where to get started, what resource would you send them to that you have on your website?
Right, right. The Dr. Carolyn Dean website is my educational website. I'm pretty sure that we're talking about this book there. It's it's a Kindle. I think it's 99 cents most days on Kindle, and we have the print on demand copy as well. And it's $10. I tried to make it really reasonable so that people could get educated. And on the drcarolyndean.com website, you can have access to my webinars, my weekly radio show. I have a call-in radio show and blogs and all the rest of it. My store website is rnareset.com. So I
Mm-hmm.
got the RNA going long before the COVID stuff happened. I guess I was prescient. I knew that we had to take care of our RNA and DNA. And that's another thing that magnesium does. There's so many things. We have
Mm-hmm.
not even scraped the barrel, Freddie.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna do a deep dive on the book. I'm gonna start doing. I think I need to read it. And just keep going along because it's been something that magnesium has fallen in and out of my cupboard. I always have it. Like you said, I have at times I've done the transdermal spray that is quite itchy, so that's easy to overdo. It's funny. I've given myself loose stool with the spray. I've sprayed too much. Um, it does find its way in and out of my cabinet, but after doing a little research prior to the podcast and just having this conversation, I'm interested in seeing what happens, what I feel like after 3 or 4 months of just being a little more. Do you have
Mhm.
timelines that you like to tell people? You're like, give me 60 days, give me 90 days. Like, I like to frame that for people so it doesn't seem so intimidating. Is there a guideline you give people to like lean in and see if they feel a shift?
Well, it really depends where you start. If you're severely magnesium deficient, it's going to help you within days.
Yeah.
I've had vegetarians who are on their 40 ounces of green drink a day, and they're twitching and palpitating, and they say, I think I have magnesium deficiency, but I shouldn't because I'm on all this green drink. And they'll take a couple of teaspoons of picometer magnesium, and they'll come back the next day and say at a weekend conference, they said, my symptoms are gone because they're so darn healthy, but they're just missing magnesium.
Hmm.
I mean, with most things, we tell people to give it 3 months. Three
Yeah.
months is the growth time of a red blood cell, growth, adult and then death. So 3 months is a good span. But,
That's great.
if someone is severely toxic, they do have to take it slow. If I'm saying, oh, you need 600 milligrams of a picometer magnesium, you don't take it on the same day. What you do is you take your water, you have some sea salt in it, you put in a quarter teaspoon, and you drink that through the day. 2 days later, half a teaspoon. Sneak up on these things because if
Hmm.
you don't put the gas pedal down fully on your first drive of your new Mercedes.
No.
I just got a 2011 Mercedes for, I don't even drive, but I got it for somebody. And yeah, those things really move. And you have to go slow. You
Yeah.
really have to. You have to treat your body very gently. And the sea salt, did we talk about sea salt? Water guidelines, take your body weight in pounds, cut that in half, and drink that many ounces of water a day. And in each quarter liter of water, put a quarter teaspoon of a good sea salt. Good meaning it has to have some color to it, so you know
Hmm.
that there are minerals in it. And
Yeah.
you don't start with a quarter teaspoon, you start with a pinch. And that's where you get your sodium for your adrenal glands.
Yeah. So important. And then one more question, Carolyn, before we reach our hour here. You get a magic wand. You can tune in all the television stations in everybody's home. You get to talk to people on planet Earth. What would you say to everybody right now at this time in our existence?
Well, wow. Yeah. Well, we're on our own, so we have to take responsibility for ourselves. We can't depend on anyone, personal or government, to take care of us. But at the same time, we watch each other's backs. We take care of each other. Take care of yourself first. Make sure you have your food in check, your sleep, your exercise, get out in nature, start smiling, take care of yourself, and then start taking care of others a little bit. And then that aloha will come back to you.
Beautiful. Well, it was a pleasure having you on. We'll definitely do another one. We have so much more to talk about. And I will link the book and your website and the Instagram channel. Is there one Instagram you want people to look at if they want to follow your work?
Ooh, I guess it's probably rnareset.com.
Okay.
There's
That's the one I was
also
going to say.
yeah, I would go there. I mean, I have so many social media. What? We're on blah, blah, blah. I mean, I can't even keep up.
Yeah.
But they're making me do videos now. I have to do these little, but I enjoy it. I enjoy it. I mean, and I enjoyed this conversation. It was wonderful. It was
Me
very
too.
rich, very
Me too.
rich. Thank you.
Me too. Well, thank you for being a guest on the Beautifully Broken podcast. We will turn around. We'll do it again in the future. And I can't wait to dig into the book. Thank you for being here, Carolyn.
Aloha, mahalo.
Aloha and mahalo. Big love.